Welcome to Enabling Buying in a World of Selling. This is a podcast with leaders, thought leaders in my world, and what enabling buying in a world of selling means in their world. If you're curious about the idea behind all of this, check out my book, Enabling Buying in a World of Selling, at enablingbuying.com, where you're actually able to listen to some chapters and pre-order the book today. Let's get into it. So welcome, Katie, Keith, and Michael Quigley. We've known each other a while through Global Chamber, and it's my honor and privilege to invite you to have this very casual, open mic kind of a discussion around enabling buying in a world of selling. That's my terminology, but you can use any that you're happy with about selling, buying, and just to kind of frame up some context. I remember, Katie, you said something about push versus pull, and Michael, you said something about guide versus transact. So before you respond to that, I just planted that as a seed. Do you want to give us a little background on each one of you, starting perhaps with Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. And it's such a delight to be here having this conversation with you and Michael. And I've known Michael for a very long time. And also it's been lovely getting to know you over the last 12 months too, Charles. And the Global Chamber has brought us together. So what a wonderful community. And I think my background is 25 years working in banking and finance. And over the last 7 years, I've actually diversified as a portfolio career woman. And whilst working in finance, I was leading the Global Chamber in London as the executive director. And over that 5 years, I've really grown an amazing international business community and really learnt the art of working with colleagues across borders. And I think that really comes into how we sell. That pull and push came around that as well. And recently, I left the corporate world and I launched KK Collective, which is an elite platform for women in business who are really serious about growth and transformation. I bring cross-sector women together in elite success circles, and we're just about to launch our first circle in October. So absolutely delighted to be doing exactly what I was meant to be doing on this earth, and great to be here today to share some insights in how we do it as well.
Wow, that sounds awesome. I'd love to really dig into that later, perhaps. Michael, do you want to tell us about you?
Yeah, so first of all, I got to follow that, right? Katie is amazing. That was brilliant. Just off the top of your head. That was amazing. Yeah, so my name is Michael Quigley. I'm on a mission trying to help 1 billion people. I'm a former primary school teacher, and I'm running my own business, Catalyst. And my approach really is I do the hard work in private. The thing that people don't see, the leaders, the business owners, they come to me and I make content and I can speak and I can train and I love doing that. But really, where I come alive is spending time with people in private and helping them to grow, because then they can come out in public and have those enjoyable things. And yeah, so far, thanks to places like the Global Chamber and international clients, I've started working in 2 languages now, in English and Spanish, which is very exciting. And my goal is just to do as much good as I can. And a lot of the stuff I've learned on sales and things is it's not self-taught because other people have taught me, but it's been learned on the job, as it were. So yeah, that's me. That's my background.
Beautiful. Very accomplished. So why don't we just dive in terms of what's your take on this idea of buying versus selling, the buy side, the sell side, and why is it so important today? At least in my perspective, it is, but why is it today so important to really be able to work hard at distinguishing the two? And why does it matter?
It's a good question. Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think it's a really interesting question, and I think when I first started selling in banking, and I remember being in my first sales meeting, and I was quite young at the time. I think I was only about 19 or something. And I remember just piping up in this room full of very seasoned banking sales professionals, and I said, "Well, you can't really have sales without service. It doesn't count then, because service is intrinsically intertwined with sales. Why would you want to buy something if you didn't feel like you're getting value?" And so there's something really powerful about always having the customer at the center and the heart of everything we do, and actually thinking from their point of view. And so I've always, since the beginning of time, adopted a model of needs-based selling. It's always needs to have a need at the end of it. And I think from a buying side, we typically buy because we feel the urgency and need around it as well. So I think if you can marry the two in your business, I think it's really important. How do you marry your products and services to a life event to build urgency around the buying psychology? And so that's been something I've carried with me throughout my banking career. You know, when we're going to buy a house, well, you need a mortgage. And now I'm going to grow a business. I need a community behind me. I need to know what to do. So I'm going to buy coaching, or I'm going to buy mentoring. I've just bought a dog. I need to buy insurance. You know, so those types of things are really important. So I think if we can marry the two, service and sale, and really pull the need into it, I think that's the missing piece.
Beautiful. Michael, you have any thoughts on that?
I love what you said about service and sales, because in the kind of work that me and Katie do, we have products, but we also have services. And products can be, you can have services and you can productize it, right? And you can have products that exist within a service. And people say, you don't understand, I sell products, it's different. I'm like, no, it's the same thing. So I love the way you equated service with sales. I think, firstly, being an English person, the majority of English people that don't have businesses don't like being sold to, which is quite interesting. And the moment they feel there's a sales conversation, some of them, they start to kind of be like, oh, I don't like being sold to. So as I work more globally, I've realized that's not everybody's like that. And I heard someone once said, just make it easy for people to buy. Make it easy. Tim Ferriss said, what would it look like if it were easy? And I like that, because people then go, well, it's not, it's complicated. And the point is, it's to try and unpick the cognitive ideas around selling should be hard, or, you know, it's just for certain people. And I think the thing Katie said about needs is really important, and understanding people. I think buying cycles is something that I only understood in my second or third year of business. You know, some people buy from you once a year and they're very happy to, and that's enough. And if you try and approach them at a different time in the year, it's like trying to sow seeds in summer. It's not going to work. But then other times people come to you on a needs base. So you need to know kind of buying and selling. You need to make it easy on kind of both sides. And for me, I don't know about Katie, you know, but the majority of my sales conversations or meetings, they're successful because I don't ask for them in that way. People come to me with the need. We both understand the phrase trusted advisor. And just as a quick story, the first time I ever understood that was when somebody said to me, you'll never have to sell to us. You're a trusted advisor. And what they meant by that was, you know, you don't need to try and do something you don't need to do it. Just tell us what we need. Now, to reach that point, obviously, as Katie knows, takes a lot of trust, takes a lot of time, you know, and you can't get that if you're trying to buy a washing machine. You know, it doesn't work like that. So I think almost like sales and marketing are almost sisters. I think buying and selling, you must understand both. You spend so much time trying to sell to people, you don't understand what they're buying, you know. And I like what you're saying, Charles, about enabling buying. As a quick aside, I had a friend in Lancashire in the UK, and she's brilliant because she did about 7 years ago a buying event. So you didn't come to sell anything. They found out 20 different types of businesses and what they were looking to buy. And she just created a room where people had options. So every single person in that room wanted to buy, they had the money. And can you imagine how that was a different vibe to 20 people turning up, expecting to be sold to, and maybe they want to buy, maybe they don't. So I think if you could facilitate that in the right way, it would be so much easier. And the final point I'd make is people post-COVID and with very, you know, smartphones, they're very opinionated and they've got a lot of options. So you need to know your stuff because they've got so much choice, you know? So I think you've got to respect that, and you've got to understand that people have access to your social media, your reputation, alternative, you know, they at a click of a button, they can get that information. So they're looking to you to say, all right, give me something that I haven't read online. And that's where you need to kind of to be able to step in.
I love.
Can I jump in on that actually, Charles? Because Michael, you said a couple of things there, and one word that stood out for me importantly was trust. And people need to have a sense of trust in the buying process. And we do have access to our phones. We've got access to so much information, but there's some of the key elements like trust is it's not as evident online when you're looking to buy. So we can become consumed in researching what it is we want to buy, but we don't know why we don't pull the trigger. Why don't we put our credit card in? Why don't we buy? And that's because there's a bit of trust missing there. So there's something about that connection and that trust that's really important. And you often read through these feeds and that you get right to the bottom, you think, oh, am I going to buy that weight loss drug? Oh, I don't know, because do I trust it? So, social selling is really important. So you read the comments, you read the reviews, and there's just this big process around buying through the new channels in which we buy. And I always find that that's push sale. We're pushing it onto you. We're giving you information. We're going to push everything down your throat, and hopefully you'll buy at the other end. And it's all mass numbers. But the pull is about, how do we tell the story? How do we pull people into our offer and what we're achieving? What's in it for them? The Whiffam effect. So yeah, that was just my thoughts around the trust element that you raised, and then the online digital landscape that we're faced with every single day as well, which can really give you paralysis by analysis. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I love that expression. I'd love to, you both deal with businesses, and so do I. And I, in particular, dealing with sales teams. And I would I would say in every case, without exception, every sales team and every person in that sales team has pressure to perform. And I go back to something Michael said, which is, on average, you have a buyer, somebody who's in a buying role, usually temporarily. They're going to buy one or two solutions, let's say, in a consultative sell, let's say, a year. So for them, buying is very, it's a one-off event, sometimes two or three at most, let's say. For the salesperson, it's the complete opposite. You have salespeople who have to hit targets, let's say, and so they have to close, let's say something as an example, 3 deals a month. And if you think of that, that's 36 deals a year multiplied by the number of opportunities, because you're not going to close every deal you're working on. So now you've got to multiply that deal by 3 or 5. In other words, for you to close one deal, you have to have 3 in your pipeline, or in some cases, 5 in your pipeline. So immediately that puts a very different spin on the buyer's perspective versus the seller's perspective. And I'll get to a point, because I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I just want to create this idea in your mind that you've got very contrasting perspectives. The salesperson is under enormous pressure to keep their job because they have to generate sale after sale. So how do you balance everything Katie was saying, like trust and pulling versus pushing under this enormous weight of pressure, and a buyer who is looking at a salesperson as kind of like a one-off event? And so how does that play into your arguments, or does it play into your arguments?
I'll
Michael?
take this one first if you want. Yeah, sure. So it's a very good point, because it's very important that we think that everything we're saying today exists in real life, in a context. We're not just saying ideas that we think are nice. I know Katie does what she's talking about, and I know you do as well, Charles. And the people listening to this want something. Maybe they are that salesperson and they want something. So I've got a background in helping children as well as adults, and doing martial arts and playing in bands. Basically, a lot of public performance, a lot of pressure. And I remember once playing at a pub, and it was really rowdy. And my dad said to me before I went on, he was like, you don't have to do this. Like, you can opt out if you want. I was like, I'll be fine. I remember I was playing on my own, and this woman came in drunk, and as soon as she came in, she saw me, she went, "Way!" And I went, "Way!" I just matched her energy, and we had a bunch of fun. So there's 3 aspects you're talking about there. There's the buyer, understanding that person. There's the pressure, and there's the performance. And I think you need to respect all 3. Because the key emotional point you're saying there, Charles, if I read your question right, was that pressure can have a negative effect on performance. Well, that's where the kind of work that Katie does and the psychometrics and things can really help, because you need to understand yourself under pressure. Some people under pressure thrive. and some people wilt. And numbers can be vanity metrics, what I call, vanity metrics or meaningful numbers. So to go to the point, I'd start by the salesperson understanding you're in a race here of 3 horses, and you need to have all 3 sorted: the buyer, yourself and your pressure, and how you perform. So notice that pressure and performance, they're 2 things that the salesperson can control. Nothing to do with the buyer. And I'm sure we all know people that are really confident and calm, and you're like, tell me why you need me to sign because you're just amazing. And so that's really important. The numbers come into it, obviously, but I'd have some fun with that, because I know this from marketing. Things that I've done I thought would do really well, and they've tanked. And then other times I've put out one thing and it was the right thing for that person in that moment. So you got to respect the numbers. But I'll just give you a quick story of understanding what those numbers mean. So I have a great friend in the insurance profession, and they're under pressure. They're under pressure to sell policies, but also for renewals, because they're not just selling as a one-off event, like you say, Charles. They're under pressure that person should buy the policy from the company and then next year want to stay. So it's almost like a double thing. And I never forget, he said to me right at the start, he called me Quiggers, Quiggers, I'm not going to try and sell your policy. And I went, okay. He went, I want your renewal. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I was quite new to business at the time. He said, I want you every year for it to be a no-brainer to renew with me. So the medium to long-term perspective. And what you do there for a buyer, for me in buying position there, he made it really easy for me to want to buy from him. Because I'm thinking, well, you better show me with the level of service. So when it comes to that renewal, I'm either going to want to, guess what? For 7 years, of course I had. I remember I worked internationally and they tried to triple my insurance, and he was not having it. And he fought my corner. And so by getting that renewal mindset as opposed to transactional, I want your policy mindset, you can make a lot more money, and you can start to think more medium term. And actually your bosses, what's your boss going to be more happy with? Hey, I closed the deal, or I've closed a 5-year renewal. And actually the way that business is set up these days with things like Netflix and subscriptions, people are more willing to do that. They're more willing to subscribe to where they get value, as a regular thing, as opposed to a one-off transaction. Even things like the fashion industry, moving away from just buying and making all this stuff and it just rotting somewhere. We want to move towards kind of like, when I engage in something like Kate said before, is this really what I need to buy? Because if the answer is yes, I'm in. And if you can make it easier for me so I don't have to keep buying all the time, well, I'm in again, because I don't particularly like buying stuff. Just tell me what I need. Okay. So it's quite a long answer. But I go back to the buyer, the pressure, the performance, and then shifting maybe from a selling one-off, to a renewal. So I'd love to know, Katie, your thoughts on that, because I know you have a lot, you teach people in those areas.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. I love how the 3-horse race, very, very powerful. And I think, I've led quite a number of different size sale teams in the past, and we can easily get hooked up on the numbers so much that we're so far in the frame, we can't see the picture anymore, the big picture about why we're doing what we do. And so the pressure does come from the numbers and performance, and then we can impact our performance if we focus too much on the numbers and not enough on the clients. So there's about striking a balance here. And I think a really good sales team will be thinking, what's coming in the top of my funnel? What's massaging through the middle of it? What's being converted and what's renewing at the other side? Now, depending on where you are in the sales cadence cycle, you could be bringing in, you could be nurturing. So there's different people might be chiming in and might be relevant for them or not be relevant for them. But at the center of everything, it's really good time management. It's having a really good attitude towards selling. Some will, some won't. So what? Move on. We need to move quickly as salespeople, because not everyone's going to buy from us. But the more caught up we get with the rejection, that can often lead to that pressure of then looking at the numbers, and you can get into what I call a vicious cycle. And what you think about most, you attract most of. And so when you're thinking about, I'm not going to meet my numbers, I'm, this and that and everything else, that can hold you in a stuck cycle. So it's about releasing the attitude towards selling. If it's an open mindset in terms of, I'm offering great service, I'm bringing clients in, I've got a healthy top of funnel, I'm massaging my clients through, I'm being authentic, I'm delivering on the service that we promised. I think that attitude is really important for good salespeople. Now, we don't wake up after school and go, I am so looking forward to being a salesperson. It's not like people go out and go, yep, that's the career for me. But many of us fall into a salesperson career. You know, I was in banking, sales. People used to go, oh, you must be great with numbers. I said, no, I'm good with people.
Mm.
And that's what it's all about. I'm really good with people. I'm authentic. I'm genuine. I know my stuff. I'm going to be really upfront and honest with you about what we're selling here and what you're buying. And I think that's really important. And a lot of business owners as well. So people who might be listening into this that have an amazing product, whether you're a plumber or a coach or whatever it is you're selling, you didn't realize when you went into business that you'd also have to be a salesperson and you'd have to learn how to sell yourself as well. So we are all salespeople every single day. And so how we bring our attitude towards selling is really, really important. So I think attitude first, and the 3-horse race, Michael, I think that was gold. I think you really do have to balance that out.
Oh God, such great stuff here. Like I'm getting nuggets. I'm writing all this down. Well, I'm writing a whole bunch of insights down. And one couple of things both of you said uh, kind of got me to think of two concepts that I really love, renewal and authentic. And I heard what you said, Michael, about the insurance salesman saying, I want renewals, but it made me think of another kind of renewal, and that is the salesperson. If, in my opinion, I'd love you guys to comment on this. If you're a good salesperson, you're likely to be very introspective, let's say. And sales is one area that I know very well compared to operations. By the way, I used to be a technologist and I was a programmer and a coder and an analyst. So I do understand the operational side. And I can tell you from experience that sales is one of those very introspective type of jobs. Because if you're dealing with people, you got to constantly look at your authenticity, back to what you said, Katie. So let me give you an example to sort of set up maybe another aspect to this discussion where let's, for example, say every month you start anew as a salesperson, right? You finished your last month and you got to start again looking at your pipeline, looking at your what you did last month. Did you hit your targets? Did you miss your targets? Why did you miss your targets? And what are you going to do about your future targets? Are you going to apply any lessons you learned? You get the drill, right? So there's that whole introspection. And then there's that in that authenticity about, trying to balance again the pressure with being yourself. So tell me a little bit about what you think the opportunity is in this sort of renewal cycle that we kind of keep looking at when we're in sales.
I think I'll jump in here because I think some of the best salespeople I've seen are authentic and authentic, and they do reflect on what worked, what didn't work. And so there would be a situation where we would sit down and go, right, what do we do more of? What do we do better? What do we do different? And what do we do less of? What's taking our time? We don't need to. And I think we have to get creative about where we meet our new clients. And there's something about comfort and stepping out of comfort zones for salespeople that are willing to go the extra mile to grow their pipeline or their portfolio or reach out to new people, build new relationships, promote themselves more effectively. Those who are out networking are getting more because referrals are the best sale. And so that introspection and that reflection on what we need to do differently is really important. And mentoring, I think, comes into this as well, and having a good mentor, someone behind you to encourage and support you to use new tactics, new methods, help you grow as an individual, as a salesperson as well. So, someone said to me the other week, the caves we often don't enter from fear often hold the treasures we seek. And so by going and venturing into that cave and trying something different and seeing what and being experiential about it as well. What can I try this month as an experiment that might get me a better result? And so if salespeople are listening to this, what's one experiment you can do this month that makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable, that could just get you the result that you need? So it is about being creative, I think, Charles.
Yeah, thank you for that. Michael, you have any thoughts?
Yeah. So to build on what Katie said, I love when you're talking about doing something different. And you're quite right. As we go along in life, we just have this little backpack and we take on memories and relationships and aches and pains and things. And there's something very liberating in just kind of saying, let's just put that down. You've still got all the knowledge you've learned over the last decade or whatever. But if you're starting again right now, what would you do? And often, like you say, people come alive. Oh, I do this differently. We'll do that. And I was talking to a client this morning, actually, and she's doing great. And I was saying, you realize how well you're doing because you know these different things, but you're not just doing things differently, you're doing them to become better. I think that's key for salespeople because we can make the difference, need to understand the difference between activity and improvement because we could be going to networking events, like Katie was saying, but if we go with a bad attitude, it's a waste of time. Or we can go, I've been to 10 different ones, but maybe 2 would have been better if you'd chosen. So I think it's really important, like Katie was saying, what are you doing differently that's going to make you better rather than just doing, the same thing? So I think that's a key point. And the second thing is, like you said, Charles, about introspection. There's different ways your brain thinks. And one is the intrapersonal, like intravenous, thinking inwardly about yourself. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't that bring out the best of me? Why did I shout at that team member? Why did I get upset? But then the interpersonal, like Katie was saying, she's very good with people. It's no good being really good at introspection and coming up with an answer and coming up with an improvement if you don't then are not able to deliver that to your team in a way that's exciting, encouraging, and kind of a bit like the Wolf of Wall Street. The guy was lying, but he sold it in such a compelling way that I'd have probably got on board with that. And I think that's really, really important. Think about the introspection, but there's no point going within if you don't then go without. And then there's no point doing all the without stuff if you then go back and go in and go, was that a waste of time? Did that work really well? So I think like Katie's point, about understanding yourself really well is really critical because then that informs your strategic decisions. There's not much that you can do to stop a person who's willing to take the action and try something new, reflect on if it works, keep challenging themselves and improve. You cannot stop that person because they're diligent and they're dedicated. And if they do it in an authentic way, they're fun to be around as well. So you're absolutely right. It's about a renewal of the self, because good salespeople, you want to be around them because they're usually attractive personalities as well.
You hit the nail on the head, Michael. It's the interpersonal skills that really get it over the line, because the hard skills, the process part, like assumptive selling and closing the deal and, offer to assist. And there's all these sales tactics that we learn in our one-day workshops when we go to learn how to sell, but it's the interpersonal skills that really get it over the line. So it's a combination of being able to combine both of those, and the soft skills really count. That personability, that warmth, that, genuine connection that people are seeking. And that comes back to the trust again, which I feel is coming up as well. So yeah, absolutely spot on.
So I'll challenge the three of us with a slightly different perspective, meaning we spend time with what we have access to as coaches and trainers, and that is the salespeople. I don't think we spend much time with buyers. And, I just completed my draft of my book, and I, at the very beginning of my book, say, if you want to, you can learn a whole bunch of things from a sales manager or a sales trainer, but the person that's really going to teach you about selling is a buyer. And so I was at dinner with a work colleague, and we were talking about this, and she's like, "Oh, I really like that idea. So if you had to sum up in one sentence, what's your book about? Like, what is this whole thing about enabling buying in a world of selling?" And I said, "Great, thanks, Stacey. You really want me to say it in one sentence?" She said, "Well, see if you can, what's the essence?" And I said, "I'm going to give you the answer, but I don't think you're going to like it." And she said, "Try me." And I said, "Okay. My answer is be the buyer. Be that person." And she's like, "Wow. So how do you teach people how to do that?" And I said, "Well, that's the wrong question, if I may be so bold, because when you're being the buyer, it's not a do, it's a be. And why I particularly think that's powerful is the moment you start asking yourself that question, because no one's going to give you the answer except you, because no one can teach you to be anything. You can only be what you can be. The moment you start asking those questions, I think you're already pivoting away from this viewpoint of the seller. And so long as you're stuck in that viewpoint of the seller, all your actions and all your being will correlate to selling. But if you put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and you really go, I want to be that person, what pressure are they dealing with? What is it like to be that person? It opens up a completely different way of examination, I think. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'd be curious if you guys agree or disagree or have your own ideas to add into that and whether that makes sense or not.
Yeah, where you've tapped into the brain is, that negative bias that we hold, that's sort of wired inside of us because it protects us, from the big wild unknown, that's sort of the amygdala, for example. And what happens is, we go into negative bias. So being the buyer and putting ourselves in the shoes of a buyer almost as the seller, it takes a little while for the brain to process that, Charles. So you're right. It's actually about reframing a narrative here about selling and buying. And so the being part, often with women I work with, I ask this one question in my circles: why am I so successful? Not what is it going to take for me to be successful? And the things that I've dealt with over the years is we're very good at making assumptions about what our buyers need from us and what they're going to say. And a lot of salespeople go, they won't buy that. Or there's a lot of these limiting beliefs and limiting assumptions that we put into our own minds about what the buyer is going to do. So reframing that and going, being the buyer, we need to think of it from a totally different perspective. And so I think that you're definitely onto something here. And I think it is about rewiring everything we know about buying and selling and looking at it from a totally different perspective and dropping those limiting assumptions around the selling piece. Because Michael said earlier, people don't like to be sold to. And as soon as they feel like they're being sold to, it's like this whole wiring inside of them shuts down the conversation. They just go into objection mode, right? And so if we approach it from a buyer perspective, that may reframe what's going on the other end. They're just some thoughts. I don't know if I've got answers for you, Charles, but they are my thoughts around what you've just shared with me. And I think you're absolutely onto something there.
Yeah, before you jump in, Michael, I would just say I think I actually honor what you said more than if you came back to me and said, "Oh, to be the buyer, you have to do step one, step two, step three, step four." I'd be no, because that's the seller thinking what they need to sell, step one, step two. So I love the idea of this constant checking in and examining, but coming from a positive mindset and rewiring your brain. Does that tee you up, Michael, for any thoughts?
It does. It does a lot, actually, more than Katie's maybe even realized. I love your attitude of just that open-mindedness and that willing to be spontaneous and embrace, if a conversation goes a certain way and you're like, why is that person like that? Tell me more about that, open-ended questions. I'm feeling this way. Why is that? Really? And I think, if I'm being honest, especially if you're doing global sales, if you're selling to different countries, different cultures through languages, as we learned through the Global Chamber, and Katie's taught me a lot about that, is you have to watch out. Sometimes it's good to be generic and say people from the East, people from the West, people from this country. And sometimes that's a really bad idea. So, for example, when I said English people don't like being sold to, there's over 70 million people in the UK, and some of them love being sold to.
Right.
So to use, use Katie's idea, you've kind of shot yourself in the foot there, Mike. Don't do that. And if I take that a little bit further to your point of being the buyer, having taught children and having taught adults, the biggest difference is adults tend to, not always, tend to think they know themselves. I know who I am. And they're more suspective, actually, to peer pressure and what other people think. And that puts the limitations on the mind, like Katie was saying. I can't speak up in this boardroom because I'm the only woman or whatever. And in order to be the buyer, it requires incredible self-awareness, emotional intelligence, radical openness of the kind that I've only seen by a very small amount of people. So I'll give you an example. I've been meditating for a long time, over 10 years. And you tend to think there's me and I'm sat here meditating, and it kind of falls apart after a while. And then you start to realize there's something here and it's connected to other things. But what that does is it frees you up and your mind calms down and goes quiet, and you can fully be there with whatever's going on. And that's the spirit of what you're talking about there, Charles. If you're fully there with the person in that moment, with whatever it needs to be, if it's a sad moment, you're sad. If it's a happy moment, you're happy. That presence, people will understand that. So like I say, it's not about step one, step two, how to be the buyer. But everybody knows, for example, what it's like to be sad. You know, I give another example. My dog, right, Kochi, whom I love so much, has presence. You don't see a very distracted dog. You know, you wouldn't see a dog when you enter the house. He's like, in a minute, I'm just on the phone, or I'm thinking about yesterday. He's there with you. And that brings out a vitality and a joy and a spontaneity and everything. And I think back to my most effective buying conversations. And I remember one, if you don't mind me telling you very briefly, took less than an hour in person. It's probably the most money or value I've ever equated in one meeting. And it was back to Katie's point about urgency. They were like, we need some help with this. I was like, oh, I've got something really good for that. Is it available now? Yeah, we're in. And it like changed my business overnight because they trusted me. I had a very, very good product. More importantly than that, there was a sense of urgency. I didn't put the pressure on them, like you were saying before. You know, it wasn't you need to buy this. It was they had all this fear, and I could tell. And I was like, I got something that it's fine. It'll help you with that. You know, so that ability to reach out to whatever they're giving you, but also like Katie was saying at the same time, you've got to be radically open-minded. You know, it's like before the Zoom call, before the team call, for the meetings, take 5 minutes, just empty your mind completely. And then once you do, the interactions you have there will be so much more authentic than if you're sat there, when she says this, I'm going to say this. It's okay. But I think people listen to this want to go beyond being okay. So I think you're definitely onto something. And I think people will love it. And I think it's also very important for people to understand that it's hard to do. But because it's hard to do, when you do it and do it well, the results will change your life. So I need to read your book, Charles. You've already sold one to me. Well done.
Listen, I have to respect your time and reality of having a busy work schedule. So first of all, this was a gift for me to listen to two people I truly respect, but I'm sure you're in a circle of people that respect you as well. And so I'm really grateful that you took the time out of your busy lives to meet and talk about something that I feel is not only important to me, but I think it's important to humanity, because I think I 100% agree with you, Katie. We're selling all the time, right? Selling ideas. Even if as a parent you're selling, as a teacher you're selling. So I really think this is important enough. And what you said, I'm sure, is going to make a big difference. So as a way of sort of wrapping up and winding down, I like to ask more of a personal question, if I may, of each of you, which is you're both smart, you're both accomplished, and people listening might be asking, so what inspires you, or what book have you read, or is there something that you feel, and I don't think it's just one book, but it could be a lot of things. Like, can you speak to like what got you inspired to do what you do and be successful as you are?
Oh, it's a good one, Charles. And it's been a delight to be here today, Charles, by the way. It's really opened my mind up to think about some of the things that are going on in my business as well, and reframing some of the ways I look at things. So very, very helpful. And I think back to my early days of leadership, and I always reference back to Louise Hay, Empowering Women, which is an amazing book. And I actually hand it out in my circles when I meet. Here she is, actually. So I think A Woman's Guide to Successful Living. And I think there's just something really powerful. And it's almost like reading that book made me realize that I'm not alone. And there's other women who are ambitious and wanting more from life as well. And I'm so grateful that now that's led me to a career where I can provide space for other women to come together in psychologically safe spaces to grow their business and overcome the same challenges we're discussing here today. How do I sell myself? How do I sell my business? How do I grow? How do I become something more? And we're in such a busy, noisy world, a very busy, noisy world, so global, so connected. We're moving at a pace that's faster than we've ever experienced before. And so I think where we're going now, in terms of the future, I think something really personal for me is how do we pave the way for the next generation to come through and enjoy a world that we've created, so that we can all be, I love that being, be together in a global environment without that noise all the time.
Beautiful. Michael, any thoughts?
Louise Hay's How You Can Heal Your Life was one of probably the first personal development books I ever read, Katie. I love her. I love her voice. I love the way she's like, "You're beautiful." And I'm like, "Yeah, Louise, talk to me." There's definitely something about her vibe that resonates with me. And what inspires me, I'll give you my answer as it is now, because it's changed a lot. And I'm sure, people watching and listening to this might resonate with this. You want the next thing, the next qualification, the next sale. When I get this, when I get this, when I get this, when I get this, no, this one, when I get this one, I'll be happy. And what I'd like to encourage people, in my experience of inspiration is incredible. You feel that breath of life in you, like, oh, yeah, I know, that moment. And you'll have moments like that. And you'll have had moments like that. You've closed a deal, you've been on a holiday, and they're great, aren't they? They're like fleeting little moments, like bang, bang, bang. Oh, my life's awesome. And then people put them up on social media and you start to kind of see everybody's life is great all the time. And they're like, oh, but it's not. And most of my life isn't like that. But what I've realized is whatever it was in that moment, to me, was you being open, like Katie was saying before, to life as it really is. And it wasn't about achievement. It was usually about connection and joy. What I've realized, if you try as best you can and be open to it, you can experience like all of your life like that. Because it started to happen to me. When I get this belt in jiu-jitsu, when I get my house, when I get my car, you do that. But that doesn't sustain you. That doesn't renew you, not really. And it starts to flip and you start to, I just like my life at the moment. I'm just happy being me. Or I'm enjoying this and that. And it starts to become, anything can inspire you because your eyes are wide open and you're like, wow, I'm just happy to, everything's amazing. And I think that's encouraging for people because I'm not special. Like if I can learn to be like that, everybody can learn to be like that. And like we said, full circle, it's very attractive to people. People want to be around that. And like Katie was saying, you're not trying to do anything. You're just being. And ironically, that results in the highest performances and the best times. So yeah, it can feel like moments. It can feel like pockets. But where I'm starting to think is it can be a way of being, hopefully.
Love it. Well, again, you've given me also a lot of things to think about. And I just have to say thank you. I know I'm going to meet Katie next month in person in London. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I really am. And Michael, I'm sure our paths will cross in person someday soon, hopefully. And I'm thrilled that we made the time this morning. It's my first thing. I got up real early. You guys are 5 or 6 hours. I think you're 5 hours ahead. So this is the beginning of my day and probably the middle of your day. But regardless, it's been a pleasure. And I really look forward to staying connected and learning from you and learning from each other.
Thanks, Charles. It's been brilliant. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Enabling Buying in a World of Selling. Real talk with people who are really interested in this concept. Again, as a reminder, please go to enablingbuying.com where you can listen to some sample chapters from my book. And if you're interested, you can pre-order a copy for yourself. Looking forward to seeing you soon. And in the meantime, please enable good things.